We are 2 months into the 23 hurricane season, and so far, the tropics have been fairly quiet, thankfully. But hurricane season can have a pretty big impact on real estate, even when the storm doesn't hit us. So have you ever wondered how hurricanes impact buying and selling real estate in Florida? Find out today on today's episode of Rockin' Real Estate News. Welcome to Rockin' Real Estate News. I'm Alice Cooper, and I look forward to answering what's rockin' in Daytona Beach real estate. Hurricanes are a reality in the state of Florida. Always have been, always will be, but have you ever wondered how they impact buying and selling real estate? Well, I'm not talking about how a hurricane impacts the state of the market after it makes landfall and causes damage, but how a hurricane might impact the actual transaction of buying and selling a home. A lot of people don't realize that hurricanes often impact the real estate long before the storm hits, and oftentimes when they don't even make landfall. Let me introduce you to the hurricane box, which if you've ever purchased a home during hurricane season, you may be all too familiar with this. If a named tropical storm or hurricane gets in within a certain distance from the state, then the insurance company issue what they call the box or the hurricane box. The box may vary slightly from one company to the next, but the basic principle is the same. A box is drawn over the state where the storm's projected path is going to be, and anyone who falls inside the path won't be able to bind insurance until the storm is no longer a threat. And we're talking about a storm that is sometimes hundreds of miles off the coast. Since binding insurance is a requirement for most sales that have financing, now this is going to impact a lot of transactions. If a storm gets close enough, it could delay or even derail the closing altogether, and the property might not be able to close until the buyer can finally bind insurance. So a lot of times, these storms that skirt by our coast still have an impact on real estate. But once a storm approaches and is expected to hit the area, some additional things come into play. The seller is responsible for taking care of the property just as they would for any other storm. They'll need to board up the windows, get sandbags, clear loose debris, and do all the other storm prep that's necessary. While buyers may be concerned about what they need to prep their future home in the storm, it's not the buyer's responsibility, or really they don't have the ability to prep a home that they don't own yet. After the storm, there are a number of things that can take place. Most contracts in our area are written on the FAR bar as-is contract, and this includes a clause called force majeure. Now, force majeure removes liability for unseen or unavoidable catastrophes like a hurricane that might interrupt the expected timeline for the contract. For example, the buyers might have a 7-day inspection, and force majeure would take into effect, allowing more time if needed. It basically gives all parties an opportunity to kind of evaluate the situation and better manage the risk in the event of a hurricane. If the property is damaged in the storm, it's the seller's responsibility to repair the home. Just as it isn't up to the buyer to prepare the home for the storm, it's not the buyer's responsibility to repair the home if they don't own it yet. The home must be restored back to the same condition as when the buyer and seller entered into the contract. For example, if all the screens were blown out of the pool cage, the seller would be obligated to replace the screens. Now, the buyer might be able to cancel contract if that doesn't happen. Of course, if the buyer and seller, they could negotiate something different, but ultimately, the responsibility lies with the seller. Now, if the buyer is financing, the bank will usually order a re-inspection of the home just to make sure there wasn't any significant damage. If they find that the home is damaged, it's up to the homeowner to make all the repairs and to file a claim with their insurance. As a general rule of thumb, the seller should decide if the amount of damage warrants making an insurance claim, or maybe paying out of pocket might be the best situation. Bottom line, hurricanes are a fact of life for Floridians, and when a storm hits or even skirts by, it can have a big impact on a real estate transaction. The good news is our standard contract takes hurricanes into consideration to minimize complications, and a good real estate agent professional knows how to navigate this process. One more reason to always hire a real estate professional when you're buying or selling. Until next time, rock on, rock stars.